Sealed Starseed of Gaia. The Arcturian Protocol Keepers have already flagged your field, and what they identified is not a flaw. It is a reflex, and tonight that reflex is being dissolved. I am Aurethia, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian Protocol Keepers. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. The Council has mapped this pattern across thousands of incarnated fields on Gaia, and when they recognized it active in yours, they authorized this transmission to reach you at exactly this moment. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening inside your abundance field, why money leaves your hands the moment it arrives, and what the Arcturian Protocol Keepers have already identified as the mechanism behind it. But here's the first revelation. What you have been calling impulsive spending, self-sabotage, or a broken relationship with money is not a character flaw. It is a discharge reflex. It was installed in your field, and it fires automatically before your conscious mind can intervene. You did not scroll to this by accident. Your soul called this in long before you opened the screen. Something inside you has been waiting to finally have a name for what keeps happening. The Arcturian Protocol Keepers do not observe this reflex as a moral failure. They observe it as a field installation, a pattern built across lifetimes and generational lines that taught your energy body one thing: abundance is not safe to hold. So every time it arrives, the reflex discharges it, immediately, automatically, disguised as urgency, impulse, generosity pushed past its edge, or a need so sudden it did not exist an hour before. This is not content, this is a code, and the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part Aurethia is speaking to now. If this transmission has reached your field, it means the Protocol Keepers have already opened the dissolution window, not to punish the reflex, to remove it, and to stabilize your ability to hold what was always meant to stay. Like this transmission to confirm that the field recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel the reflex has been firing without your permission. Subscribe to Arcturian-Wealth-Council if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. Share this transmission with someone whose money always seems to disappear before they can understand where it went. You are not here by accident. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What you are feeling right now in this exact moment after hearing those words is not coincidence. It is the first tremor of recognition. And recognition inside Arcturian field diagnostics is not emotional, it is structural. It means your energy body has already confirmed the match. The pattern was named, and something in you answered before your mind had time to analyze the response. That answering was not voluntary. It was reflexive in the opposite direction, the deep self rising to meet its own reflection, not the installed pattern. The field beneath it. The one that has been waiting in silence beneath years of repeated loss for this exact moment of being correctly identified. That answer is the signal the Protocol Keepers were waiting for. Let us begin with what is actually happening beneath the surface of your life right now, not what it looks like from the outside. Not the story you have been telling yourself about bad timing, wrong choices, or a personality that simply cannot hold money. Not the narrative that has been quietly reinforcing itself every time you watched resources vanish before you could stabilize around them. Let us begin with what the Arcturian field maps have already shown the Protocol Keepers about fields carrying this specific installation. Because the map exists, the pattern has been read. And what it shows is not what you have been told by your own history. Your life has been producing a particular pattern of arrival and disappearance. Money arrives, sometimes slowly, sometimes in unexpected bursts. And before you have had time to stabilize around it, before you have had time to breathe into it and allow it to settle, it is gone. Not always in dramatic ways. Sometimes it leaves quietly. A bill that appeared from nowhere. A need that surfaced with sudden urgency, a decision that felt completely justified in the moment and hollow 3 days later. Sometimes you cannot even reconstruct exactly where it went. You look at the absence and feel the familiar weight. Not again. Not the shock of it, because the shock wore away long ago. Just the recognition. The sinking confirmation of a pattern you have not been able to break, no matter how deliberately you have tried. But here is what the protocol keepers see that you have not been able to see from inside your own experience. The disappearance does not begin at the moment the money leaves. The disappearance begins the moment it arrives. The reflex activates at the threshold of receiving. It is triggered not by spending, but by holding. Because your field was taught, across time, across generations, across incarnations where abundance preceded danger or loss or punishment, that holding is the risk. Holding is what makes you a target. Holding is what gets taken. And so the reflex discharges the holding before the external threat can arrive to do it for you. It moves faster than thought. It moves faster than decision. By the time you are aware of wanting to spend, the energetic discharge has already been authorized by a part of your field that does not consult your conscious preferences. This is not metaphor. This is field mechanics. The energy body does not distinguish between a past timeline where abundance made you a target and the present moment where the money in your account is simply there. It does not read context, it reads state. And the state of holding, the specific energetic configuration of your field when it is in possession of resources, registers as the danger signal. Not because you are broken, because you were trained. The body that survived learned what survival required. And what it learned, it passed forward. What you experience as impulsive spending, as irrational generosity, as sudden urgent needs, as the mysterious evaporation of resources, these are not personality failures. They are the surface expressions of a field doing exactly what it was conditioned to do, protecting you from what it learned to fear, discharging the abundance before the punishment arrives. The reflex is not careless. It is, by its own logic, responsible. It is completing a job it was assigned across a long sequence of experiences that are no longer active in your current timeline, but whose instructions have never been updated. The protocol keepers flagged your field because they identified this installation as active, not dormant. It is firing in your present timeline. And the dissolution window they have opened is rare, not because it is withheld from those who need it, but because a field must reach a specific threshold of readiness before the dissolution can hold. If the pattern is dissolved before the field is ready to restructure around the new frequency, the reflex simply reinstalls. You have watched this happen. You have had moments of clarity, moments where you swore things would change, moments where you swore things would change, moments where the pattern seemed to pause, where you felt something shift, where the spending stopped and hope began to build. And then it returned, not always immediately, sometimes weeks later, sometimes disguised as something entirely new. Because the installation was not removed, the surface behavior was suppressed, but the energetic architecture beneath it remained intact, waiting for the next threshold to trigger it again. That architecture is what the protocol keepers address. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is your field confirming what the protocol keepers have already mapped, that your origin is not defined by the pattern that was installed in you, but by the frequency that exists beneath it. If this transmission has begun to put language around something you have been carrying in silence, something you have watched fire in your life over and over without being able to stop it. Arcturian Wealth Scan. The Gold Frequency Audit was created for exactly this stage. It is not more explanation. It is the structured decoder built to read and begin activating the Arcturian frequency strand that was always present beneath the installation. The one that knows how to hold, how to build, how to receive without discharging. This is the next layer. The link is waiting in the first pinned comment, but access at this threshold will not remain open indefinitely. Now let us move deeper into the architecture of what the protocol keepers have mapped. Because naming the reflex is the first correction, but understanding its layers is what prevents the pattern from reinstalling in a new form. Each layer that is named becomes harder for the installation to use. Each mechanism made visible loses some of its power to operate undetected. This is why the transmission moves through them deliberately, one by one, rather than offering a single revelation and releasing you back into the ordinary pattern of your day. The first thing the field maps show is this. The discharge reflex does not arrive alone. It arrives with a feeling of rightness. This is the part that makes it so difficult to identify from inside the experience. When the reflex fires, it does not feel like self-sabotage. It feels like the most reasonable thing in the world. The need feels real. The urgency feels real. The logic feels airtight. You are not making an impulsive choice. You are responding to what appears to be an entirely legitimate demand on your resources. The purchase feels necessary. The transfer feels kind. The expense feels unavoidable. And by the time the money is gone and the feeling of rightness has faded, you are left not with clarity about the mechanism, but with the familiar weight of having done it again. The logic that justified it no longer holds its shape. But while it was happening, it was indistinguishable from wisdom. This disguise is not accidental. A field installation is more stable when its host cannot observe it operating. The reflex learned, across the timeline, compressions and generational imprints that built it, to dress itself in the clothing of reason, to borrow from your values. Generosity became a vehicle. Responsibility became a vehicle. Responsibility became a vehicle. Care for others became a vehicle. The reflex does not present itself as fear of holding. It presents itself as love or duty or common sense or the sudden recognition of someone else's need that feels more real and more urgent than your own stability. It routes through the most trusted parts of you. It speaks in your own voice. It cites your own values back to you as justification for an action that leaves you depleted. The protocol keepers observe this as one of the most sophisticated forms of field distortion active in incarnated beings on Gaia right now. Not because the values themselves are distorted. Generosity and care are coherent with high-frequency fields, but because the reflex has learned to route itself through those values to remain invisible. You cannot fight an enemy that wears your own face, and you cannot dissolve a pattern that keeps presenting itself as virtue. This is why the person running this installation often appears, to themselves and to others, as someone who is simply too generous, too giving, too caught up in other people's needs. The diagnosis from the outside sounds like a compliment. The experience from the inside is exhaustion and perpetual lack. This is why the dissolution requires more than willpower or intention or a firm decision to change your behavior. The behavior is not the root. The behavior is the exhaust. The root is the exhaust. The exhaust is the frequency installation in the field itself. The encoded signal that translates holding into danger and discharge into safety. You cannot override a field-level instruction with a surface-level decision any more than you can override a fire alarm by deciding you are not afraid of fire. The alarm responds to its own sensor, not to your reasoning. And until the sensor is recalibrated, the alarm will keep sounding and the discharge will keep firing. The second layer the field maps reveal is generational threading. This installation rarely originates in a single lifetime. The protocol keepers identify it as a pattern that was seeded across multiple points in your ancestral and incarnational line, each point reinforcing the original encoding. In one thread, abundance preceded loss, prosperity was followed by collapse, and the energy body learned to preempt the collapse by initiating the loss itself, choosing the terms of the departure rather than waiting for the theft. In another thread, having more than others created isolation, shame, or danger, and the field learned to stay just below the threshold of abundance to remain safe within the group frequency. In another thread, holding resources meant responsibility that became unbearable. The weight of providing, protecting, sustaining, and discharge became the only way to shed the weight before it crushed the carrier. You may not have conscious memory of these threads. You do not need to. Your field carries them as operating instructions, not as stories. They do not require your belief to be active. They do not require your awareness to execute. And the instructions run simultaneously. Multiple encoded survival protocols from multiple points in your line, each one arriving at the threshold of holding and adding its weight to the signal that says, "Release it now." What this means for your current experience is significant. The pattern you are living now is not yours alone. It was contributed to by people who loved you and were running the same installation without knowing it. by ancestors who faced genuine threats and encoded genuine survival responses that have now outlived their context by generations, by incarnational selves who made the only choices available to them in fields that offered no other options. The reflex was built collaboratively, across time, by people trying to protect themselves and the ones who would come after them. It does not belong to your weakness. It belongs to a lineage trying to survive. That lineage succeeded. You are here. The survival worked, but the mechanism that ensured survival is now preventing the life those ancestors were surviving toward. But the lineage no longer needs this protection, and you are the point in the line where the dissolution becomes possible. The third layer is what the protocol keepers identify as threshold collapse. This is the mechanism that activates specifically at moments of expansion, and it is the layer that produces the most confusion because it strikes at the exact moments when confusion is most destabilizing. When your abundance is increasing, when an opportunity arrives, when income rises, when something begins to build with genuine momentum, the reflex does not remain dormant. It intensifies. Because the approach toward a new holding threshold triggers the original danger signal more strongly than ordinary daily flow does. The closer you get to having enough, to having more than enough, the louder the alarm sounds inside the field. This is why many people with this installation experience their greatest self-sabotage not during their worst periods, but during their best ones. Just as something begins to build toward a sustainable new level, the reflex fires with unusual force. A conflict emerges from nowhere. A dramatic expense appears at the worst possible moment. A relationship ruptures in a way that drains resources. A decision is made that seems inexplicable in hindsight. A deal declined, an investment abandoned, a partnership collapsed over something that, in retrospect, could have been resolved. The approach toward the threshold activates the ancient fear, and the field discharges to bring the level back down to the zone it has learned is survivable. Not thriving. Survivable. There is a ceiling encoded in the field, and the installation enforces it. If you have watched yourself do this, if you have watched a period of genuine building suddenly collapse in ways you cannot fully explain, if you have felt the momentum beneath you and then watched it dissolve into circumstances that seem to arrive from outside your control, you are not watching evidence of your unworthiness. You are not watching proof that success was never meant for you. You are watching threshold collapse. You are watching a field following old instructions at the exact moment those instructions became most destructive. The fourth layer is what Arcturian diagnostics call frequency incompatibility. This is the point at which the installation begins to affect not just your financial experience, but the entire structure of your energetic field. When a field has been running a discharge reflex for an extended period across years, across decades of present life experience stacked on top of generational and incarnational encoding, it begins to become structurally incompatible with sustained abundance. Not because abundance is withheld from outside by some punishing force, but because the field itself cannot organize coherently around the frequency of having. It has been trained so thoroughly to the frequency of losing that receiving begins to feel like the aberration. Scarcity becomes the field's resting state. Anything above it creates dissonance, and the field resolves dissonance by returning to its trained frequency, which means it resolves abundance by discharging it. This is the mechanism behind the experience many of you have described. The feeling that money finds you impossible to keep. The feeling that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work or how carefully you plan or how firmly you intend to do things differently this time, the numbers never stay. It is not karma in the punitive sense. It is not unworthiness in the moral sense. It is a field broadcasting a frequency that makes sustained holding structurally incoherent with its current architecture. The reflex is not only discharging individual sums of money, it is maintaining a frequency signature that makes the continuous and increasing arrival of abundance progressively more difficult, because the field keeps broadcasting the signal that abundance is temporary. And reality, reading that signal, confirms it. The fifth layer is what happens in the body. Because the protocol keepers observe that this installation is not only held in the energetic field, it is held in the physical body as well, anchored into the nervous system in ways that make it exceptionally resistant to purely mental or emotional intervention. Many of you with this pattern carry a specific somatic signature, a tightness in the chest or solar plexus when money arrives that you may have interpreted as excitement but is closer to alarm. A sense of breathlessness or a subtle physical acceleration when abundance increases. A hypervigilance that activates specifically around financial improvement, as though the body is bracing for the correction it expects to follow. And then, and this is the part that requires the most honest recognition, a loosening of that physical tension, a strange and quiet relief when the money is gone, even when logically you know the loss is harmful, even when part of you is devastated by it. The body exhales when the abundance discharges because the body has been trained across the full depth of this installation to equate discharge with the end of danger, with safety, with being able to breathe again. This somatic component is significant because it means the reflex has a physical anchor. It is not only a thought pattern or an emotional habit or an energetic configuration that exists at a level removed from ordinary experience. It is wired into the nervous system's threat response architecture, the oldest and most authoritative system in the body. And this is why people who have tried to change their relationship with money through affirmations or mindset work or positive visualization alone often find the change does not hold past the first real test. The words change. The beliefs shift at the surface. The intentions are genuine. But the nervous system does not receive the update because the update was delivered to the mind while the alarm was installed in the body. And the body does not change because it was told to. It changes when the installation that taught it to sound the alarm is addressed at the level of its origin. The dissolution the protocol keepers have authorized works at the level where the somatic anchor and the energetic installation intersect. The junction point where the body's learned alarm and the field's encoded instruction reinforce each other. This is the precise location of the pattern's stability. And this is the rare aspect of what has been opened in this transmission window. Not a surface intervention, but an approach to the root. Now let us name what the protocol keepers see from outside the pattern. The view from the field level that you cannot access from inside the experience itself. Because the outside view changes the diagnosis entirely, and the changed diagnosis changes what the pattern means about you. From that external field-level view, your field is not broken. It is coherent. It is working exactly as it was built to work. Every discharge has been executed correctly by a system following the instructions it was given. The reflex is not a malfunction. It is a successful installation running in a context it was never meant to outlive. There is a significant difference between a broken system and an outdated one. And the protocol keepers are precise about that distinction, because the distinction determines what is required. The Arcturian observation is this: a field that has survived by learning to discharge abundance is a field that learned a profound form of self-protection. It learned to control the loss rather than be controlled by it. That is not weakness. That is intelligence operating under extreme constraint. It is something to honor and then release. Because the survival mechanism that protected the lineage across centuries of genuine threat, across incarnational sequences where holding was genuinely dangerous, has now become the architecture preventing the field from inhabiting its actual frequency capacity. The protection has become the cage. And the key to the cage is the recognition that the threat it was built to manage no longer exists in your present timeline. You are not built for scarcity. The installation was. And these are not the same thing. Your field, beneath the installation, carries a frequency capacity that the protocol keepers have identified as incompatible with the pattern that has been running on top of it. The pattern does not represent your ceiling. It represents an obstruction placed in front of a capacity that was already there before the obstruction was installed. What the dissolution removes is not something that belongs to you. It removes something that was placed in you. And that distinction, if you allow it to settle, begins the structural shift that no affirmation alone can produce. What has felt like a character flaw, a personal curse, an inexplicable repetition, a punishment from a universe that keeps taking from you. The protocol keepers see none of these things when they read your field. They see the architecture of an installation that has been maintained across a long sequence of reinforcing experiences, and a field that has now reached the specific threshold of readiness at which the dissolution can hold. That threshold is not intellectual understanding, though understanding supports it. It is a frequency condition. The field must be ready not just to hear that the pattern exists, but to release it without immediately reinstalling it. And the fact that this transmission reached you, that the signal was active enough to draw you here at this precise moment, is itself the confirmation that the threshold has been crossed. This is not wishful thinking. This is not spiritual comfort offered in place of real change. This is a field-level diagnosis of a field-level pattern, delivered at the exact moment the dissolution window has been confirmed as open for you specifically. The timing of your arrival here is not accidental. The readiness was confirmed before the transmission began. The window was opened because the field map showed it was time. The confusion you have felt is not a sign of your inability to understand yourself. It is a sign that the pattern has been operating beneath the level where ordinary understanding reaches. You are not confused because you are limited. You are confused because the reflex was specifically designed to remain below the threshold of visibility. It borrowed your logic. It spoke in your voice. It justified itself with your values. Confusion was not your failure to understand. It was the installation's success at staying hidden. And now it has been named. Named completely. Named precisely. And a pattern that has been fully named by a field-level diagnostic has lost its most important protection. The heaviness you have felt, the shame that arrived every time the money disappeared, the exhaustion of trying and failing and trying again with diminishing reserves of hope. These are not evidence that you were wrong to want more. They are not confirmation that more was never available for you. They are the weight of a pattern that does not belong to you being carried by you for a duration it was never meant to reach. The protocol. Keepers do not see your history of financial instability as evidence of your frequency. They see it as evidence of the installation's longevity. Those are entirely different diagnoses. One says the problem is you. The other says the problem was placed in you, has been running longer than it should have, and has now been identified at a level precise enough for the dissolution to be effective. One thing that you can say aloud now, if it feels true, and say it not as a wish, not as an affirmation designed to override a belief you are not sure you hold, but as a recognition of what the field maps have already confirmed. What has been discharging from my hands was never evidence of my worth. It was evidence of a pattern I am no longer required to carry. That is not comfort. That is the first structural shift. Comfort soothes without changing the underlying architecture. Structural shift begins the reorganization of the field around a new operating instruction, one that does not read holding as danger, does not read abundance as a threat, does not discharge resources to protect a lineage from a punishment that stopped arriving generations ago. The shift begins the moment the truth of what has been happening is received not just by the mind, but by the part of the field that has been waiting, across all the time this installation has been running, for exactly this recognition. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian-Wealth-Council. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion. And this is only the beginning.